Live brunch. We are live. Welcome to another episode of Live Brunch. Live Brunch. Live Brunch. Yes,
Hi.
welcome to another episode of Live Brunch.
Welcome. Which camera are we looking at?
I don't know. We have an interesting hat situation going on.
Yeah, we've swapped hats.
I'm in a rather oversized hat for me.
Yeah.
You got a pretty cool hat.
It's funny, my head is definitely... But the big size of the hat suits you. You look good in it.
Do I?
You do. You totally look good.
Thanks, man.
I'll leave it to the viewers to say whether I look good in this one, but it is important because...
Drop in the comments
Yeah.
whose hat looks better.
Okay.
Who's wearing the hat better?
Yeah, that's
Right.
You're allowed to say. But that's all we're going to say about that because there's no banter to this one. We get straight
Let's get straight into it. Mate,
straight.
so you've just preached on one of the most, I think, not the most, but a very bizarre story
Yeah.
in the Old Testament
Yes.
during the Exodus.
There are more bizarre stories.
Yes, but this is up there. It's probably top 5.
It's, no.
Judah and Tamar is another one.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I think I'd love to do a whole session on the most bizarre stories. I think we could fill
our
a few
next
hours.
sermon series
Yeah.
on the most
Yeah,
bizarre
that's
bits
an
of the
idea.
Bible.
Let's do that.
But these people go from having the pillar, the cloud and the fire. Is that
Yes.
it's with them, and they can see clearly some presence of God.
Yeah.
And then there's God descend on the mountain where Moses is up with them.
Yes.
And then they start having orgies and worshiping a golden cow.
Yes.
What's that all about?
So you're saying you've never done that? I think
I've never been in an orgy or worshipped a golden cow.
Thanks, Yohaan. The main message of today is that Yohaan has never done those things. I think the key thing to take away is that we don't act according to reason as much as we think we do. And that's a big part of the answer. So I gave 3 answers really.
Yeah.
Our hearts, we're led by our hearts, and then secondly, our hearts lead our minds. So often the way that our worship and our desires and our yearnings go is in ways that, in the cold light of day, look irrational.
Yes.
But that's part of the thing. So Romans chapter 1 makes a huge point of this, where Paul writes to the church in Rome. He says, that claiming to be wise, our hearts, we become fools. Our hearts are darkened. It's like the lights go down, the dimmer switch comes on, and it affects even our reason. And worship and thinking are totally linked. So it's interesting. Romans chapter 1, Romans is a very important book, and we'll get into it. And we're planning to get into Romans next year. That's a newsflash, just for those of you out there who love your Bible. We're going to go through Romans at some stage in the near future. So God willing, that's the plan. But Romans chapter 1 is one of the most important things ever written, because it's like the diagnosis of humankind from God's perspective. And what it does is it links worship with thinking, because it's saying those who turn to idols, they become less effective, they become less intelligent. It's a strange thing for us to imagine as our modern 21st century, where we think that we're more intelligent because we have test tubes and smartphones and bombs. But in the Bible, it's saying, no, the further you go from God, the more unwise you become. And that's why in chapter 12, where Paul talks about how kind of worship is being restored to the heart, it says, as your act of worship, he describes it as your reasonable act of worship. Coming back into relationship with God means that we are not just more spiritual, but more reasonable, and our minds get renewed. So that's a big part of why things like the golden calf story are so peculiar.
I guess one of the question I want to start off with is, I remember talking to somebody really close to me, and we were talking about Christianity and why she turned her back on God and those sort of conversations. And she said one of the big problems that she had with God was that if he just appeared now in all his majesty and in all his splendor,
Yes.
with YouTube live on him and Instagram live on him and him just being all over the internet, or
Yes.
just appearing big in the sky, everybody would worship. Everybody would acknowledge that he is real, and there would be no doubt about his existence and about his splendor. Why doesn't he do that now?
Yeah, I mean, the simplest answer is, again, from the same place in the Bible, actually, or the way in Romans it talks about a lot of these things quite explicitly. They're all over the Bible, but Romans Romans is a bit like the espresso of the Bible. It's kind of so much clear teaching. And it just says, there's what the Bible calls suppression of the truth. That's what Paul says. We suppress the truth in unrighteousness. There's a willful suppression, which is so effective that we wouldn't even realize we do it. So the story we tend to give is that we are almost like the victims of feeble information. That God is not a very good communicator. He needs a better PR firm to get the branding done and get the message out, because just get the message out, baby, because you just got a really tiny slice of the market, and you need to just put it up several notches. The Bible says the opposite. The Bible says that these things are plain. Who God is and what He's like, and is actually very clear from creation. He's communicating all the time. And you go back to places like Psalm 19, where it says the heavens declare the glory of the Lord. Every day you wake up, every day you see a sunrise. That is the creation doing God's PR. It's always coming, but there's a suppression that goes on here. There's a willful suppression in the human heart, which is rebellious. So there's much more to say, and I think we need to be sympathetic. When people say it feels like God is far away, that is a real thing. He is the God who hides himself, in a sense, and that's a big issue. We need to help people and talk that through, and not just say, well, you're just not listening to him. But nevertheless, the ultimate picture is that what we need to know about God is plain. And it's something that we hold in suppression because we're not comfortable around him.
I've been reading C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy, which are 3 phenomenal books.
Yeah, wow.
And listening to a podcast on it the other day, where it talks about how, because we've tried to get so reductionist, and in some ways so scientific about what we base our decisions on, and our opinions are, if I can see it and if I can taste it and if I can touch it, then it's real. If we can conduct a whole bunch of experiments, then it's real. And we neglect it, but that doesn't explain everything in life.
No, and it's not even scientific, is it? It's scientistic.
Scientistic.
Yeah, people say, well, that's scientific, but it's science itself, when it's done properly, will make way more space for forms of knowledge and knowing things than just through laboratorial experimentation. There's all kinds of ways to know and understand things besides that kind of knowledge. It's scientism that makes it into a kind of religion that says thou shalt know nothing except what we can prove, through our positive systems of science.
He was talking about, in C.S. Lewis's books, he talks about space and going to Venus and going to Mars and exploring what he says that there's life on those planets and what that life could look like. And I guess when we look at some of the modern day movies on space, Gravity and those films, space is quite dark and dead and scary. And yes,
right.
there's a fascination with it, but there's also like a fear that surrounds travel into space. And are we limiting our appreciation of who God is by doing that? Are we
I reckon we are.
Dulling down our imagination?
Totally. It's an interesting avenue to go down. We don't normally talk about this stuff on Life Brunch. No. I enjoy this. Do you know that the word space is never used out there until the 17th century? It wasn't until John Milton used that word, the poet, about space, that up until then, for most of human history, the heavens, which is a much happier, much more full word. The heavens declare the glory of the Lord, and the Lord is in the heavens. And now we have this cold word, space, this kind of totally kind of acrid, dry, empty word that doesn't communicate any life or any joy. And it's not a question of whether there's Martians. That's not the point. It's about whether there's something lively about creation, that God is always communicating, that there's the stars sing, that creation sings. Everything that around us is a way of God expressing himself. But our imaginations are really narrow and tiny, and we should shrink it down to nothing.
So what would you say are some good ways for us to cultivate worship in our hearts and us being enamored by who God is and us being drawn to him? What would you say, what are some disciplines or what are some things that we could do to, I guess, cultivate a deeper longing for God, which is worship?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. See, ultimately, it is looking. It's looking to see, and that's what we dwelt on in the last section of this message today. It's those who've seen the Lord, seen His glory. The problem with these calf worshippers, these cow worshippers in Exodus 32, is that their imaginations, that what they've seen was limited. They hadn't really beheld the Lord. And so anything that helps us to see the goodness of God and the way he's most clearly shown himself is in his Son. And so my mind goes straight to songs, and we sang this morning after this message, here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God, you're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful. That's written by a guy who has clearly, he's overwhelmed. I know the guy who wrote it. There's a beautiful sense in which this guy he's spent some time considering the loveliness of who God is. And it's a very simple song. Apparently, it is now the song in the universe, the world, that has the most royalties. I think "Happy Birthday" is the only song that has greater royalties than that.
That was the Mariah Carey's Christmas song.
Maybe it is by now. I don't know. But the last thing, this is a few years ago, maybe out of date now. I mean, I'm hoping to beat it with my songs about plants and things. I've got some great numbers.
Hats, songs and hats.
But there's there's something about taking time to behold, to contemplate, and we are creatures of contemplation. We are creatures of imagination. What we give our minds to is very important, and what we tend to do by accident, perhaps foolishly, is we see worship as a sort of a ritual, an act that takes a scheduled place in our week. So I go and do a worship time. I go to worship once a week for an hour or so. When the rest of the time our imagination is taken up with Marvel films or pasta or I don't know, decent craft beers or the girl that we're desperate will notice us next time at the office or whatever. It's just our minds go places, and we contemplate and we meditate and we take time. And it's not that those things are wrong; they may be gifts from God. But what we give our mind to when it comes to the living God is massively important in terms of the way our hearts are directed.
Yeah. Even Anna Brading's song that we sang at the end, "Born to Love You."
Yes,
it's a phenomenal song. I love it
so well.
And we are born to love him.
Yes.
We weren't just born to think about him or obey him, even though all of those things are wonderful.
Or believe in him in some kind of, sort of...
have some knowledge of him.
Yeah, exactly.
But we were born to love him. Our emotions, our affections were intended to be stirred towards who God is.
Yeah.
I do really enjoy singing Anna's song,
Yeah.
Born to Love You. It's on Spotify.
Yes.
Because this is who I am.
Yeah.
I was made for you. All that you are satisfies my soul.
Yes.
Oh, it's just a wonderful song. So Anna
Is,
Brading, thank
we
you
need
for
more songs like that.
writing that song.
Yeah.
And we do have a distraction, but there are some very talented songwriters amongst us, aren't there? And I just love that we sing.
You're talking about me
songs.
again.
I am talking about you.
Thank you. I'm undiscovered so far, but
On a side, Naomi Dawson introduced the firecracker Katie Virgo on Instagram Live, and I've got the firecracker Joel Virgo, and it's just a firecracking fun.
Thank you. Wow.
I think let's have a look at some of the idols that can come in our way of worshiping God. I think for me, one of the idols, and it's been a fascinating season because in a way this idol could have reared its ugly head and been amplified, is the whole idol of hustling and being busy and achieving and accomplishing. For me, that's a big one, where I can get distracted by being productive, which is not a bad thing in itself. You want to bear fruit, and the Bible talks about cultivating our talents. But just the second lockdown that we are in now has made me the first lockdown or the first bit of the pandemic was crazy. I was very, very busy.
Yeah,
and lots of us were very busy. But in a strange way, at least at the start of lockdown, we thought, hey, I'm going to have a bit more time on my hands. Let me see how much more I can achieve and accomplish, and how much more can I hustle. But in some ways, I didn't burn out, but through a process of just getting exhausted and saying, hold on a second, this will just carry on for as long as I let it carry on. I can always make sure that I'm busy.
Yes.
This season, the second lockdown has been out. You know what? I'm not going to get busy. I'm going to actually enjoy some of the time I have on my hands. I'm going to enjoy kids being back in school and working from home, which affords other opportunities, like having coffee with my wife in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
What are some of the idols that you think, as millennials, as post-millennials, people who now, what would be some of during the pandemic, some of the idols that could rear its head? Any observations?
Yeah. Gosh, it's a good question. I must. I'd have to think a little quick in terms of. I think I think that it seems to me that during lockdown, for many of us, it's more internal stuff, our own importance, our own pride, our own egos. I think we're very aware of ourselves during lockdown, and because our relationships are all shifted in terms of how they function and how we can be around people, and the subject of conversation and the rearrangements of our lives, a lot of the collateral is that we are slightly less sure of ourselves, and when you're not sure about the future, you're not sure about your salary, your job, you're not sure about your value to other people, you're not sure about relationships that may have changed a little, and so on. The temptation is to really try to rush to hold up the idol of our pride and our importance, and to nurse our sometimes self-pity, sometimes I think it's all those kinds of things are sort of features of a certain kind of idolatry, I suppose. It's a little bit more internal, a little bit less obvious, but it's dangerous, because we might end up doing, saying, thinking things that are very destructive, but not because of anything wise, but because we feel we ought to, we need people to respect or notice or love us. And I find most of my big mistakes in life have been built around that. Have been my ego kind of holding the steering wheel a bit, and making me do things that, looking back, I think I didn't need to do that or say. That wasn't my business. But so I would say a lot of it is internal stuff, and maybe that's less obvious, but it's very important that we watch that.
Somebody just commented, you need a rest ethic as much as a work ethic.
Yeah.
That's a great quote. Having
good.
a rest ethic, just building rest into lives is wonderful.
Yeah.
If you found that there's idols in your life, so this is not just you personally or me personally, talking to the people who are watching this. If you've discovered an idol in your life, what would you say is the best way to overcome it? Or not the best way, but what are some ways we could do to overcome idols in our lives?
Yeah, I think we need to ask for help from God, and often I would say the way that God helps us will be through wise brothers and sisters who He will use to speak to us. So I think opening things up with people who we trust, who do love Jesus, who we can say, I think this is a problem. I think this is beginning to be a big deal. Help me to see it rightly. Be honest with me. Don't just be nice to me. Help me to see if this is something I really need to repent of. Because sometimes we lack, like I said, our self-awareness goes down, and we can see things wrongly. And so I think wise, genuinely good listeners who know when something is, they know us, and they can see, oh yeah, no, that's definitely become an issue in your life, and we've watched it, and now it's so good that you've seen it. So I think conversations that are honest and humble, and I think asking God through that to help us to see the seriousness of it, to see the hurt that we might cause other people. Sometimes we cherish a way of behaving, thinking that it's okay. Yeah, it's just me. It's just my style. God doesn't mind it. He doesn't seem to have a problem with it. But meanwhile, our family or our friends, they're in pain all the time. They find it really painful, the way that we do our thing. It's just me. Well, they wish it wasn't you. They wish you would stop being it. So I think asking God and friends, it's just help you to see the real proportions. We lose a sense of proportion, to see the wake that we're leaving, see the pain that we're causing a little bit more clearly, which is that in itself is very painful too. It's not pleasant going through that process. But then that's why we also need, maybe as a third piece, we need to see the goodness and grace of God. And the wonderful thing is, it's kind of the solution, it's kind of the poison and the cure in a sense. When we see the holiness of God, it can make us recoil, but actually we also start to be drawn, because we realize His arms are reaching out to receive, to forgive, to show incredible grace. I think no one is going to... Sinai is quite a powerful story, because you see that, like I said in the sermon, you see the resolve of a religious heart. All these things we will do. And the law will get that out of people. The law will make people often say, yeah, okay, we'll obey, we'll do what you said. But their hearts are not... They don't know this God they're talking to. They don't really know Him. They're like they've been called into a wedding, a marriage, and they haven't really. They've still got a distrustful attitude to Him. They don't see His value and His worth. And I think when we start to see idols in the heart, we need to start to see the God who is the better idol. You won't really be cured until in your heart you start to treasure and enjoy the wonderfulness of God.
Brilliant. What a wonderful way to come to an end. Any books that you're reading that you would recommend to people, that you'd point people towards to just cultivate a love for God and seeing more of Him?
You know, it's a huge question, and I think I'd have to try and force myself to just top of my head things, but
You can do it.
I can do it.
Force yourself. Go on.
Everyone is talking about Dane Ortland's book this year,
Yeah.
so Gentle and Lowly, which is a wonderful presentation of the heart of Jesus, what he's really like, and that will do you some. It will help you to just see. And I think books by Michael Reeves, The Good God and Christ Our Life, which are both similar. They all talk about those three books. All go down similar avenues. It's all connected importantly, but I would mention those three.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, mate. One of the big things that we would encourage people to do is live this out in small group and in community. Often your small group leaders in your community would be a good place for you to talk through some of your idols and talk through some of the ways. We're not meant to do this by ourselves. We're meant to do this within community. And even though we're not meeting physically, our groups are meeting on Zoom and online. And yep, so wearemmanuel.com/small groups. If you're in a small group, we've got a few questions for your discussion today. The first one is, what's the craziest thing you've done that you never thought you'd do? The second one is, seasons of trial reveal the heart. We're all in a season of trial this year. What does this look like for you? And number 3, what is helping you to resist idols and connect with Jesus in this season? These questions will be in your site leader's email to you. That'll come out later today. Have a lovely Sunday. Good to have you with us, Joel.
Thank you.
And we will see you next time.